Welcome back to the Messy Workshop, and I'm building a rather large wooden skeleton for someone. As you can see, the head's it's just a basic, there's not too much detail in the head, but it's quite big, and with the ribs as well, which I've painted up and primed, it's actually going to be quite a decent size puppet. Now, obviously, when you're making or carving puppets out of wood and they start to get to this sort of size, weight becomes a problem. Now, because we've got a rib cage here, I've hollowed out the ribs anyway, so there isn't much more I can take off this to reduce the weight. But if this was a puppet of this size and it had a solid body, you were carving in a solid body, then you'd want to do the same with the body as I'm doing with the head here, and that is you need to hollow out the inside. So ideally you want to think about this before you cut your part, and what I've done here is actually made, well, this jaw section is separate anyway, but made the top in two sections before I carved it, and they're actually screwed together, and then I'm going to plug these screw holes at the back when I've fully finished with it. But if you've already carved your head, or you've got an old puppet and you need to think about this, then what you're going to have to do is chop it in half, or you can sometimes split it with a chisel and split it that way. That's not my preferred way of doing it because all sorts of things can happen, but depending on the way the grain line goes, and that's okay. You might get away with that, especially if you're going to paint it afterwards. But if you're going to have a natural wood finish, then you really want a nice join. So obviously, because I thought about this before building the puppet, so I've made this in two halves, screwed it together, then carved it out. So I can undo these screws, and when I've hollowed it out, I will then glue it back together as well, so it will be permanently fixed back together. But let's remove these screws that are sunk in here. And then we can see, so we've got two parts of the head. Now, what it means I can do now, obviously, because I need the locations for the screws, you could just use dowels when doing this and you can glue it back together. But I need to keep areas around here intact so that it will screw back together nicely. But it means I can take out material all along here and along here. So this is just the front, so there isn't a great deal I can take out of here anyway. That's where the screws go in. So you need to leave a decent amount of material around your screw hole if you're going to do this method, because you don't want that to split out and break. So leave a decent amount around the holes there, but anything else you can start to carve out or drill out. But on the back here, where the bulk of the material is, so I've got a lot I can remove. Again, I need to keep just the areas around the screw holes, but I can remove quite a lot of material here and I'll probably do that with I'll drill those bits out to start with, and then I'll just tidy it up with a bit of carving. But again, it's something to think about, and I worked on a job quite a few years ago now as a puppeteer, and someone had built some wooden puppets. The show had a lot of carved wooden puppets, but they hadn't hollowed them out, and they were just ridiculously heavy, and they were bigger than these were, a bigger head than this, and there was other characters. There was a big dragon, which was just so heavy that I couldn't lift it. It was that ridiculously heavy. So yes, worthwhile thinking about and bearing in mind, particularly when your puppet gets larger than certainly larger than a couple of feet tall, but obviously it would depend on what character you're making and how much material you've got there. But if for a human character, anything over 24 inches, and you're going to have to start thinking about reducing weight, certainly. And it helps as well with cracking on the wood. So a big lump of wood, especially if that was one block, a big lump of wood, it might be prone to cracking at a later stage. So if you can hollow it out, it reduces some of the tensions in the wood, and it would stop that from happening, hopefully. So anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and do a bit of drilling out there and hollowing out, and then we'll come back and look at the result. Right, so I'm over at the pillar drill now, and I've got a Forstner bit in here. Now, obviously, if you don't have a pillar drill, you can do this with just a hand drill, or you can just scoop it out with your carving chisels. But for speed, we're going to use the drill here, assuming my bit is still sharp, which I'm not entirely sure it is, but we shall see. And so this is a quick and easy way of just removing some of the material. So there you can see there's quite a lot of material removed already. I can use my gouges and take out a little bit more around here. Just a little bit of extra weight saving, but already, as you can see, there's quite a lot of material gone. I'm not going to take too much off here because this is where the neck joint is going to come in, and I need that's going to have a hole in it anyway, so I don't want to take too much more of that area there. But we'll just look at the front of the skull now, and as I mentioned before, because there isn't much to the front piece, there isn't really much I'm going to have to be able to take off here, but I will be able to just do a little bit down here where the teeth are, and I'll just do a fraction up here. Okay, so I've used my gouges a little bit more on here, just enlarge that, and the same on the front. It's not very tidy, but hopefully it will never be seen, so it doesn't have to be. You can, if you want, and you want to go take even more material away, and you've got a sort of like a flexible drive or a Dremel or something like that, you can get a decent wood cutting burr, and you could use that to really go in there and really make it thin. But obviously you want to be careful you don't go too thin on there. But if you really wanted to bring the weight right down, if it was a bigger puppet, for example, you might need to do that. And again, that would probably be more helpful on the front here, where you could go in and really sort of tidy that up and take a bit more material away. But I think that's enough, so I'm going to put the bits back together. So I put the skull back together now, and with that material removed, it's a good third lighter than it was before, so that's a good job done. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Please check the links in the description below to my Patreon or Subscribestar pages, where you can join up and learn how to make your own wooden marionettes. There's also a link to my online shop where you can buy off-the-shelf ready-made puppets. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and we will see you the next time.